Clear the aisle, delegate approaching. A pair of Mezarn enforcers barked the command in crisp unison as they shoved a recording drone out of the walkway. Their chitinous limbs clacked over the polished obsidian tiles of the Grand Council chamber, echoing like falling blades across the vaulted dome. From the shadows of the south entrance, Ambassador Kieran Dax stepped into the circle. Not with fanfare, but with the quiet gravity of a storm about to land. Behind him, the human delegation remained standing. No entourage, no escort drones, no flags. Just the worn crest of Earth's diplomatic insignia stitched onto an aging Navy coat. A coat that had been used, repaired, and reissued, rather than commissioned for theatrical effect. A murmur rippled through the chamber, not from admiration, but disdain. Dravari guards flanking the central podium leaned in, nostrils flaring as if catching scent of something offensive. Across the central dais, Chancellor Ulzer Karvoth of the Dravari Confederation rose from his elevated chair. His scales shimmered with synthetic polish, catching the directional lighting in cold, refracted blinks. He wasn't alone. On either side of him stood what passed for ceremony in Dravari culture. Two war beasts, eyes gleaming with engineered aggression, tongues flicking in and out like they could taste fear through the chamber's ionic shielding. He didn't wait for the room to settle. "You've crawled here, Dax," Karvoth said, his lip curling, still clinging to ashes, still mistaking stubbornness for relevance. "This council entertains you only out of tradition, not respect." Dax kept walking. He didn't glance at the war beasts or at the rows of delegates that had turned their seats away in quiet alignment with the Chancellor's position. "I come because Earth still holds its seat," he replied, stepping onto the speaker's disc. "And we do not resign it at the whim of arrogant theater." Laughter cracked across the room, dry and sharp. Several Vekven envoys tapped their claws in mock applause. A Parnell diplomat flicked his tongue against his translator node, broadcasting a high-frequency tone designed to simulate derision across multiple species' hearing spectrums. Karvoth leaned forward. "You evolved in hurricanes and flame. You drank radiation. You built your first cities and floodplains and called it progress. Do you know what that makes you?" Dax's gaze didn't flicker. "Capable. It makes you corrosive," Karvoth growled. "You contaminate every order you enter. You posture as civilized, but your colonies spread like infection. Your history is a string of ruins, none of them ours, until now." A cold pause followed. Dax's jaw tensed, barely. "You speak of history, Chancellor," Dax said. "Let's clarify one point. Earth never asked for a seat. We earned it, by surviving what your kind wouldn't dare endure." Karvoth raised a claw. The chamber's noise fell away. "Enough of this ritualistic defiance. Withdraw. Cede your vote. You are not welcome here." Dax's reply wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Threats against Earth have a lifespan, not a future. Gasps rippled from the lower tiers, not because the words were loud, but because the translator nodes, across multiple species' dialect filters, failed to alter the tone. Karavoth's expression turned surgical. "Then let your record reflect this moment, Terran. You were given opportunity. You refused logic. So be it." Dax turned, his boots scraping over the speaker disc. A trail of dust clung to the platform, a trace from old boots, not ceremonial regalia. As he passed the entrance again, he paused just inside the arch. "Counselors," he said without turning, "you've misread restraint before." Then he left. Not a single camera turned to follow him. Not a single delegate stood. No standing ovation, no parting roar. Only Chancellor Karvoth's war beasts, tails swaying, eyes fixed not on the human's back, but on the trail he left behind. Outside, beyond the diplomatic corridor, Earth's delegation boarded their shuttle. There was no discussion, no debrief, just nods exchanged, and the subsonic hiss of environmental seals engaging. Kieran Dax removed his gloves only once the shuttle lifted clear of the station's docking perimeter. He stared out the viewport, not at the stars, but at the small object affixed to the hull's bulkhead, a coin. flattened, scarred, a relic from Kasari Prime before it became a human colony. He didn't touch it. He didn't need to. Behind him, one of the Terran aides, young, unassuming, mostly ignored, finally broke the quiet. They expected us to beg. Dax didn't turn. No, he said. They expected nothing, and they are about to find out what that really means. As the vessel slipped into the gravity corridor, the coin vibrated once. The course had been locked in. No detours. From the shadows of the shuttle's rear cabin, a small drone activated its node, syncing with Terran High Command. No lights, no sounds. Just the act of recording. Dax's voice had been lost. His words would be time-stamped. And Earth would respond. Cut transmission. Now. Feed dies here. The command cracked across the monitoring deck like a snapped cable. Director Vorn Halleck slammed a calloused palm onto the override panel, extinguishing the foreign broadcast mid-sneer. The Dravari propaganda feed, spitting ridicule toward Earth's council delegate, vanished from the wall-mounted heads-up display. What remained was a dull red arc of warning lights, forming a perimeter around Kasari Prime's orbital line. None of them blinked in sequence. They weren't coded messages. They were distress markers. Unfiltered. Blunt. Too many. Vorn's assistant, Deck, adjusted his visor interface, trying to cross Center State's timestamps with the orbital traffic record. I have lost colony telemetry. All planetary relays stopped pinging at once. Civilian frequencies gone cold. Any local response? Vorn's voice tightened. Negative. Orbital defense arrays show no activation. That shouldn't. Valley didn't have defenses, Vorn muttered. They weren't supposed to need them. Kasari Prime's surface, moments before the blackout, had been hosting an environmental restoration summit. Scientists, agricultural engineers, civilian volunteers, all in attendance for a ceremony marking 3 decades of atmospheric conversion. It had been Earth's quiet triumph. Proof that even sterile rock could be reborn. Now it was just coordinates. In orbit beyond detection, 6 Dravari assault frigates had exited their null corridors simultaneously. Their transponders falsified as salvage tugs, their weapons already hot. The first barrage struck the northern agriculture zone. A dense wall of kinetic projectiles cratered the terraformed ridgeline, igniting a firestorm that stripped the topsoil to bedrock in under a minute. The second wave severed the fusion grid. Life support in the subsurface residential blocks failed instantly. Emergency responders attempted to activate bunker shielding, only to find the backup relays already compromised. The override keys had been rerouted days earlier by a fake maintenance request, filed through a Dravari proxy corporation. In orbit, a research satellite kept recording, even as it was torn in half. One image survived, saved in a buffer before transmission ceased. A child's shoe, alone on a landing platform, spinning slowly in the artificial gravity. Below that platform, 23,041 civilians ceased existing within 6 minutes. No soldiers, no planetary militia. Only names Earth would now have to inventory by cross-checking DNA from ash. In New Santiago, inside a subterranean command facility, Earth's president sat at a long table without speaking. The heads-up panel before him showed a cascading list of unresolved signals from Kasari. Each line represented a zone, a registry block, a school. Some still flickered as awaiting response. The system's last failing guess. He reached out and disabled the feed manually. Broadcast, he said. Global, his comms officer asked, one hand hovering near the relay key. Galactic, he answered. Now. The camera activated without transition, no framing, no backdrop, no anthem. Just a tired man staring into an unfiltered feed. His eyes didn't wander. He didn't blink much. The screen waited, and so did every frequency patched into the council net. You mistook restraint for incapacity. You mistook our calm for permission. And worst of all, you mistook peace for cowardice. His tone didn't rise. It didn't falter. He exhaled once, not as drama, but as grief. My niece was on Kasari Prime. Her name was Elin. That was the entire statement. The screen went black before any media channel could splice commentary over it. No afterword, no rallying cry, no indicator of what would follow. Aboard the Dravari warship Kesvarn, Commander Jir Kuloth stood in the observation tier, reviewing aftermath footage. He didn't flinch at the devastation. He'd grown up watching training simulations where cities collapsed frame by frame. What caught his attention instead was the absence of human fleet movement in response. "We neutralize a core colony," he said aloud, "and they show no weapons. No signal." His communications tech glanced over. "Should I check for transmission delays?" "No. They're not speaking," Kuloth answered. He reached for his command band and reinitialized sensor alignment manually. "Which means they're doing something else." Back on Earth, in the Kasari Memorial Office, a logistics technician loaded the names of the dead into a black file. There would be no public funeral. The debris hadn't stopped burning. Instead, she marked each line in the register with a single entry: pending repatriation, unknown status. She paused only once, scanning the list for someone she hadn't found. A first-grade teacher, a systems tech, a botanist. Elon's name never appeared. In the orbital dry dock above Luna, fleet technicians received a new instruction from Central: Refit Directive Sigma 8. The specifics weren't revealed, but the parameters required full power recalibration, shielding defragmentation, and the removal of all Alliance insignias. No one asked why. A low-level tech whispered across the deck to his supervisor. "Why strip the insignias?" The supervisor didn't look up. "Because we won't be flying as part of any council." The technician hesitated, watching the heat sealers begin melting off diplomatic emblems. "But what are we flying for?" The supervisor finished recalibrating the stabilizer clamps and finally responded, "Not for, against." He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. In a corridor beneath New Santiago, a classified message was dispatched across encrypted relays toward Earth's old command satellites. Though the network had been dormant for decades, the burst protocols activated upon validation. The message had no content, just a timestamp. 2 minutes later, 27 dormant relay stations came online. Somewhere deep beneath Earth's crust, older than most stations still operational, an elevator descended through layers of hardened shielding. It wasn't automated. It required a biometric trigger, one that had not been used since the last impact drill. At the base of the shaft, a technician, barely 20 years old, waited with a clipboard he couldn't read. Not because it was encrypted, but because the headings were written in an Earth language no longer taught publicly. The man stepped off the elevator, nodded once, and said nothing. The technician handed him the clipboard, unsure what came next. The man tore it in half, dropped the pieces on the floor, and continued down the corridor. "Resweep the vector grid. Something's not right." Commander Thrask Valen, veteran of 17 border campaigns, and self-declared cynic of Earth's bluffing theatrics, stood rigid in the control pit of the Varlunix observation platform. His eyes tracked the flickering movement of Terran trade corridors across a stretched star map, fed through the heads-up display suspended above the command tier. That map was supposed to be bustling. Instead, it looked as though someone had begun tearing chunks from it, entire sectors erased like rot spreading through a clean scan. He stabbed a clawed finger into the interface node, narrowing the field. No interference. No jamming. No distortions. The trade lanes weren't being blocked. They were empty. His second-in-command, a younger officer named Gurin, frowned while calibrating his retinal overlay. "Fleet echoes around Ceres sector. Gone. Confirmed. 5 major convoys, civilian and auxiliary. They didn't reroute. They stopped reporting. Check if Earth recalled them," Thrask snapped. "Belly didn't," Gurin said, adjusting the last known transponder trail. "There's no withdrawal beacon. No traffic authority handoff. They just..." Commander Thrask rubbed 2 fingers across his lower mandible, the gesture instinctive, almost involuntary. "Even cowards announce retreat. This feels worse." He didn't know how right he was. Exerted orbital force on the Earth. A deep orbital Dravar Intelligence Division, internal dispatch. Event classification, anomalous withdrawal pattern. Affected quadrants, 049, 1172, 1601. Assets lost, 17 confirmed stations no longer respond. No recorded detonation, no evacuation logs, no debris. Additional notes, human auxiliary AI beacon tagged Sol subgrid, NX419 pinged once, post disconnection, message fragment embedded. Transit complete, access closed. Investigation pending. Somewhere within the floating graveyard of the Trillion expanse, long beyond the patrol reach of standardized escort vessels, the Dravari dreadnought Obsidian Fong drifted with lights dead and guidance systems locked in recursive resets. Its navigational core had been flash-wiped. No impact scars, no forced entry signs. Every internal subsystem had experienced thermal inversion. Coolant congealed and exploded outward from within, as if boiled alive in reverse. A small Gavari salvage skiff responding to a lost signal alert was the first to dock with the abandoned battleship. Its team boarded with standard hazard armor and full bioscans. None expected resistance. They also didn't expect what was waiting inside. All 23 decks were intact. All were empty. No blood trails, no corpses, no distress messages, not even environmental logs had survived. Power cells hadn't discharged, they had been severed from reality, overridden with zeros. As if someone had reached into the dreadnought's digital skeleton and deleted every nerve in sequence. The only clue left behind was physical, carved by heat, not tools, into the starboard corridor of Deck 7. This was your warning. Personal log. Eric Dunn, Gavari crew technician. We stepped through the flagship's dorsal hatch, expecting air loss, contamination, something that made sense. But it was clean, dry, like it had never been lived in. I kept thinking I heard something behind the walls. Not machinery. Something deliberate. But every time I turned, nothing. I looked into a command chair and felt like someone had just stood up from it. I'd never unsealed my helmet mid-sent before. I did it this time. I needed to hear what wasn't there. I still don't understand why. The others won't talk about it. Not even on the return trip. That ship isn't a wreck. It's a tomb. With nothing buried inside. In the political archives of the Council's Galactic Defense Bureau, a low-level analysis clerk flagged a pattern anomaly. It wasn't the loss of a ship. That happened. It was the timing. Every planetary withdrawal, every lost convoy, every vanished fleet corridor had occurred in a synchronized pattern, triangulated across sectors. No announcement, no disruption protocols. It was as if Earth's entire interstellar footprint had folded inward like a collapsing structure, retreating from view. He submitted the data correlation, labeled it Priority Strategic Interpretation, and marked it with the Terran seal. That was his mistake. Within 7 minutes, the file was pulled from the archive queue, his access revoked, his station cleared. The file never reached the Defense Council. Transcript, Automated Listening Post V19, Calther Ridge. Recording sequence active. Visual, black void. Audio log, unregistered tonal drop in gravity well. Shadow movement, cannot confirm form. Spectral distortions, patterned, coordinated, not storm interference. They're watching from somewhere else. End file, system failure, reboot denied. Back on the council floor, Chancellor Elzer Karvoth dismissed the rumors with disdain. They are retreating, he declared, because they have no answer. But the tactical advisors of the Lothari Confederation weren't convinced. They launched autonomous scouts through human lanes, no crew, just sensors. Of the 9 deployed, only 2 returned. Their data logs were unreadable, visual footage erased. AI components unresponsive. One probe carried a brief imprint before failure. An Earth registry tag, forcibly embedded into its flight core. Transit denied, path closed. At a classified session held behind restricted frequencies, Commander Thrask Valen was summoned to debrief before his Dravari intelligence peers. He brought with him a single piece of evidence, an image captured by a Terran relay satellite moments before it blacked out. A corridor, human steel, abandoned. A viewport window, cracked. Floating outside it a single datapad. Not broadcasting, not blinking, just suspended. Unscreened before power failed. You stepped forward. We stepped away. Commander Thrask ended the session with an uncharacteristically quiet statement. We've been looking for their answer, but we've never asked the right question. One of the analysts leaned in. Which is? Thrask stood. What if this isn't withdrawal? What if this is replacement? The room didn't move. The lights dimmed automatically for transition, but not a single officer reached for the next slide. Open Level 9, Access Clearance, Theta 7, Authorization, Rennick. The corridor lights didn't blink. They changed. From dull industrial yellow to clinical white, the entire section shifted its identity as if trying to remember what it had once been. Doors that hadn't groaned open in years, unlatched without delay. The reinforced slab sealing the elevator shaft peeled back in thirds, retracting into the surrounding bulkhead without ceremony. General Cormac Rennick stepped through without hesitation, his boots leaving dark imprints on dust that had lain undisturbed since before most planetary councils even knew what Earth looked like. A single security drone trailed him, scanning for chemical agents, though both of them knew it wouldn't find any. The elevator descended fast, too fast for civilian clearance. Rennick didn't grip the rail. He didn't even shift his stance. 50 floors down, the lift slowed to a crawl, then stopped altogether. A flat tone issued from the wall panel. No AI voice followed. This wasn't a place for voices. The doors parted. Inside the command vault, everything was operational. A middle-aged officer stood at a workstation, adjusting display feeds across a bank of aging heads-up panels. He didn't salute. Rennick didn't expect one. Instead, the officer simply nodded and handed over a tactile tablet with a hard-coded briefing. Council assets are misreading the drawdown. They think we're frightened. Sector 11 tried to deploy scouts. Nothing returned. Rennick scanned the report. Every entry was time-stamped and categorized. He paused only when he reached the line labeled Operation Quiet End. He tapped Confirm. The officer hesitated. We don't issue advisories? Let them guess, Rennick said, voice flat. No warnings, no protests, no negotiation. The moment had no theatrics, no broadcast-worthy phrases. Just a man authorizing an extinction firewall. The officer cleared his throat. Subgrid 9 is dormant. They've never launched a live action cycle. We'll need to unfreeze AI command nodes manually. Then do it. Rennick moved toward the glass wall that overlooked the network array. From here, he could see the server towers. 10 spines of hardened memory, each older than most lunar colonies. They weren't connected to standard satellites. They weren't on any registry. Most of them had been declared decommissioned decades ago. That was a lie. Earth had never intended to use them. Until now. The officer remained still. When do we engage Terran strike doctrine? When the nodes finish rewriting galactic IFF standards, Rennick said. Then we'll start removing pieces. He turned away from the view and pointed at the inner sub-vault. I want the original interface brought online. That includes the last surviving copy of Martian Sandfire Protocol. They buried it because of what it could do to fleet architectures. Now we bury them with it. A second tech stepped forward, younger, quieter. It's not been simulated since the Io Rift collapse. We don't have modeling data for that scale anymore. Rennick took 2 steps closer. You want a model, son? He said, dry as dust. Look up what a Hyperion-class carrier looks like when its own defense grid treats it as a virus. That's the outcome. The tech didn't argue further, he moved. Rennick stood motionless in the center of the room, his presence both an anchor and a shadow. Years ago, he had vanished from public record after refusing to compromise Earth's outer defense net during the Concord Reduction Treaty. Most assumed he'd been pushed into retirement. Others assumed he was dead. He hadn't corrected them. He'd simply gone somewhere no one could follow. And waited. His mind drifted, for just a moment, to the smell of scorched rain from his childhood. The solar flare riots had turned most of southern Australia into thermal deserts. He'd grown up scavenging insulation from broken farm hubs, learning to recognize the sound of brittle wire snapping in overheated ground stations. Survival didn't come from power or sentiment. It came from knowing exactly what to kill and when to walk away. The room pulsed once as the primary relay tower initiated core unlocking procedures. One of the overhead panels flickered, not due to malfunction, but because the next phase required unfiltered power transfer. A single image popped up on the confirmation terminal. It wasn't a map or schematic. It was a photograph. Scorched, corners faded. A family of 4 standing beside a water rig in the ruins of Canberra's southern sector, laughing despite the filth on their skin. Rennick reached out and turned it over. On the back was a single phrase, "No one comes twice." He pocketed it without reaction. "Tell all fleet captains to disable identification beacons, strip ship names, no insignia, no signatures." The officer narrowed his brow. "You're ordering anonymous engagement?" "No. I'm ordering unclaimed engagement," Rennick clarified. "They won't even get the dignity of saying who destroyed them." He moved toward the vault exit. The floor trembled faintly as relay locks began to shift across buried infrastructure. "General," the officer called after him, "when do we declare the beginning of operations?" Rennick didn't break stride. "We don't. The moment they stop seeing us, the game ended." He passed through the reinforced hatch as the chamber resealed itself behind him. The AI unit began activating buried nodes. Systems no one remembered began pulsing across dark spectrum bands. Every frequency that had once held Earth's name now returned nothing. But they weren't empty. They were ready. Command. "We've lost contact with your own station. Attempted ping twice. No latency return. Should we escalate the report? Classification? Defined lost. No response on any channel. Proximity beacons read active. Powers on. Crew count holds steady. Then it's not lost. Mark as glitch and rerun diagnostics." That was the last message from the Kazarn relay control hub before its own channel disconnected mid-phrase. The Velshar's Coil, a merchant-class freighter running haulage between outposts in the Galtran Drift, docked with Dredge 4 to collect stabilized isotopes. The exterior bulkheads looked undisturbed. Docking clamps accepted standard override. There were no warnings. Pilot Yaron Drisk stepped off the loading ramp expecting a grimy welcome party of tired researchers and chemical fog. He found corridors cleaner than he remembered. Doors retracted soundlessly. Display panels scrolled generic access permissions, waiting for user input. There was no dust, no leftover food trays, not even the trace of waste disposal. It was as if the station had never been inhabited. He walked into the central control room. Every monitor was functional. Energy levels optimal, structural integrity unbroken, all seating in place. Except no one was there. And every console displayed the same message. Exit was offered. He didn't touch anything. He turned around and left without checking the manifest. To Captain Debrief / Velshar's Coil, Dockmaster testimony. Backmaster. "You didn't bring anything back?" Pilot. "Not one crate." Dockmaster. "Why?" Pilo. "Because the place wasn't empty. It was paused." Dockmaster. "What do you mean paused?" "Be on it, Polit." As if the people there were pulled mid-section, like a film freeze. But there's no one. Nothing. Dockmaster. "And you're sure nothing was wrong with your ship's sensors?" Polit. "That's not the part that's wrong." 4 days later, Dravari Resource Station 6011 stopped responding. 3 attempts to breach its channel failed. The last transmission from its tactical officer read, "Unknown signature detected inside filtration core, not external, no heat trail, no weapon trace, running internal scan." End of transmission. When a drone finally reached the location, it found the station intact. Docked. Power grid untouched. but the internal ID database had been wiped. No personnel tags, no access codes, no emergency triggers. It was as if the system didn't recognize its own crew. Intel Council. High Risk. Strategic Intel Council. High Risk Sector Report. Senior Advisor Dash, we believe Earth has employed an information attack vector unlike any prior tactic. This isn't disruption, it's deletion. Tech Analyst Pavered. They're not blinding us. They're removing objects from our cognitive inventory. Not hiding. Extracting. Operations Director Held. You're saying they're unmaking things? Ever. Not things. People. A communications analyst from Varen Archive Command discovered an anomaly while sorting emergency signals. The plaque back from Kasseri Prime's last emergency burst contained not just the usual distress header, but a second layer buried in the frequency curve. It wasn't Terran language. It was Drivari. Flawless dialect. The message? Do not delay, you are not exempt. The analyst submitted the report. He was reassigned to agricultural recalibration duty the next morning. No one spoke of him again. Private Captain's log / cargo vessel. Renthry. This makes no sense. We jumped into resupply Harnack's Point, but the navigation AI rerouted halfway through with no override. It claims the coordinates don't exist. That can't be right. I served out of Harnack's for 3 cycles. We're flying blind now. I've disabled the AI and rebooted twice, but it keeps flagging the sector as unrecognized. I'm starting to feel like we're circling around a location that's no longer willing to be located. That's not a ship error. That's a warning we don't understand. 3 listening posts went dark within 72 hours. None broadcast distress. Their data was pulled by hardline tethers during standard telemetry review. In all 3 cases, last logged entries matched down to the second. Sensor logs recorded blurred motion just outside visual spectrum, drifting past at irregular angles. No drive signatures, no velocity consistency. One technician tried to classify the objects as spatial interference until she noticed the shape, the Terran destroyer hull. Except Terran destroyers didn't fly those corridors anymore. They weren't scheduled, they weren't announced, and their registration didn't match any known Earth vessel. When she attempted to tag the profile, her console restarted. Her login credentials were scrubbed from the system. Her employment history blanked. She walked out of the facility and never returned. Her security pass was found wedged inside a structural access panel near the base's water tank. No prints, no note. Just a data chip clipped to the plastic frame. And the chip? Nothing. Except one file. Still watching. Aboard Drivari Defense Monitoring Platform Echo 9, a team of analysts reviewed dozens of reports. One of them, a former Warfront scout named Kavor Drothe, leaned forward, scowling. They're not just erasing bases, he said, voice low. They're demonstrating absence as strategy. They've moved past domination. They're writing over existence itself. Another officer scoffed. You think they have the capability to rewrite what we remember? Kavor stood up, eyes fixed on the shifting star map that had just dropped another sector into gray status. We're not forgetting them, he said. They're editing what we're allowed to remember. The heads-up display flickered once. Sector 18 transitioned from red to neutral, then disappeared entirely. Object incoming, unscheduled, track vector, now. The alert clanged once through the Grand Council dome before vanishing. It wasn't an emergency signal. It wasn't routed through security command. It had no access signature, no registry code, no propulsion log, no beacon. And it didn't stop. It bypassed all gravitic deceleration rings. It skimmed straight through the layered shielding over Verdanus Prime. It passed every escort patrol without deflection protocol. And it entered the chamber mid-session. A sphere no larger than a scout drone hovered directly above the speaking platform, its frame matte beck and unmarked. No seams, no engine flare, no visible entry wound where it had come through the dome. Just presence. Delegates froze mid-debate. Whispers erupted. Heads turned. None spoke formally. Not until the high orator of the Ferrex Collective stepped down from his pedestal and stared at the device. Contain it. The chamber's enforcement units moved at once, two flanking, two advancing. Before they made contact, the object projected a tight cone downward. Not a light. Not a field. Something narrower. Sharper. A spotlight of data. Every head turned to the nearest heads-up display. Every screen now showed a frozen frame. Cassari Prime's education hub. Its wall clock stuck at 8:03 D1. The hallway window behind the instructor was shattered. Red dirt floated, not blown inward by force, but as though the world had forgotten to apply gravity. The image shifted. The next frame, footage from orbital defense logs, where the obsidian Fong had drifted unmanned and scorched. Shift again. A log capture from Dredge 4 showing corridor lights still functioning while every motion sensor registered 0 occupants. The station was operating, recording, yet acknowledging no life. Each visual stood framed in planetary timestamps, tagged with galactic positional codes. No embellishment, no commentary, only records. Then the display sequence changed. Not destruction. A sequence of attacks from the Drivari, the Vekran, the Lithari. In order. The headlines. The fleet logs. The bombings. The slurs recorded across intercepted broadcasts. Mockery, threats, and dismissals. Every provocation indexed. And then came the replies. One by one, in perfect reverse. The probe didn't explain them. It only showed consequence. Disappeared way stations. Vanishing convoys. Blacked out defense grids. Ships rendered unresponsive left adrift and whole, yet devoid of memory. No audio accompanied the feed until the final rotate. A Terran voice, neutral, masculine, low, spoke, not live, not performed, or monologue, composed, spoken without inflection, as if reciting a reading from a ledger. You documented our restraint as regression. You logged our caution as indecision. You registered our hesitation as defeat. Another frame passed, the Chancellor of the Drivari speaking on the council floor, boot grinding over the earth insignia. Then came the insults, the unprovoked incursions, the annihilation of our civilian colonies. Visual, Cassari Prime erupting from orbit, a thermal trail captured by third-party neutral observation drones. We did not retaliate in anger. That was the error you made. You expected fury. You received structure. The visuals faded. The heads-up displays turned off, all at once. Only the probe remained, now hovering just centimeters above the stone of the chamber's center. The voice concluded, "There will be no further accounting. Debt has been closed. Entry sealed. Access revoked. Ledger balanced." A final image appeared. Black background. One line of white Terran characters. Academy settled. The probe disintegrated mid-air. No debris, no flare, no signature residue. Just absence. The council chamber stood wordless. Delegates didn't move. Enforcers remained fixed mid-formation. Heads craned toward displays that no longer operated. Chairman Velkirin of the Valtari delegation finally cleared his throat, though his words cracked between syllables. "Evilish they left no demand?" The arbiter from the Mondrean territories responded quietly. That was the demand. From the rear observation gallery, an aide whispered to his sector lead. "Should we send a formal request for clarification?" "No," the lead said, clutching the edge of his table. They clarified everything. Somewhere in the lower security bay, the chamber's archivist checked the relay buffers. The playback system, isolated from live feeds, had failed to store the event. The visuals weren't corrupted. They were erased mid-writing, bypassing memory itself. He opened the backup registry. The same occurred there. No evidence remained that the probe had ever existed, except for those who had seen it, and now remembered more than they wished to. In a locked room beneath the council's legal tier, 6 advisors convened to draft a preliminary legal response. They debated wording, consensus, thresholds. The 7th, seated furthest from the light, tapped a folder closed. "No decree will matter," he said. "Not. Because we're no longer speaking to a nation, we're speaking to the consequence." At the edge of the chamber, unnoticed by most, a human delegate's chair remained empty. Not just unoccupied, undisturbed. No dust, no wear, no designation placard. As if it had never been used and never would be again. "Where are my ships?" Admiral Voris roared across the command tier of the Dravari Central Fleet Archive. His breath steamed in the cooled chamber, talons clenched on the edge of the tactical display. The heads-up interface showed an empty grid. Sector Zarn 4 had gone dark. 9 dreadnoughts assigned to demonstrate deterrence had entered it less than 90 minutes earlier. No return, no combat record, no logs. The screen didn't show red. It showed nothing. His operations officer, younger and visibly shaken, tried to frame his words with restraint. "They didn't lose contact, Admiral. They've been removed from the mesh. The grid didn't lose them. It stopped registering they ever existed." Voris turned, his pupils narrowing. "You're suggesting entire Class 7s erased their own registry footprint?" "I'm saying," the officer gulped. "The system didn't fail. Something told it not to remember." Before Voris could respond, an alert blinked across the chamber's upper feed. A high-level map refresh. It didn't come from Dravari Command. It came from the Council's archive sync. Every Terran-marked sector turned gray. No longer contested, not allied, labeled untouchable. At that exact moment, the last surviving vessel from the Dreadnought Group drifted into the outer range of Lithari neutral space. Its IFF beacon pulsed, but contained no destination. Its crew was intact, every member alive. They didn't respond to calls, they didn't activate docking sequence, they didn't speak. It docked automatically. The airlock engaged. Officials found 24 individuals seated at their posts, suits clean, eyes clear. But none of them would explain what had happened. Not under threat, not under oath. When questioned, they only gave one statement: "I cannot be described." Across the Dravari homeworld of Ravan, state-run broadcast centers played outdated military triumphs to suppress rumor panic. Footage of old drills looped as if nothing had changed. But city checkpoints swelled with civilians carrying personal storage blocks and makeshift ration sacks. No official evacuation had been announced. Still, terminals overloaded with transit requests. Clearance queues quadrupled overnight. Outside the Education Ministry in Olar Vesk province, parents shouted for archive clearance records. Entire districts had found their school registries overridden with corrupted data. Children's names replaced by null codes. There had been no hack, no virus, just a removal. The government issued a statement blaming archival malfunction due to solar fluctuation interference. But there was no solar event. On the council floor, a Lithari trade liaison interrupted a summit with a proposal to cordon Terran routes from any future diplomatic access. The proposal passed unanimously within 2 minutes. No objections were raised. The Chancellor of the Dravari was not present. He had not returned from his tour to Sector 11 the week prior. His convoy had not been listed in the updated transit maps. No obituary had been published. The chamber marked his status as withdrawn. Inside the Dravari Military Psychological Warfare Division, Commander Yak Tral issued a final systems audit for planetary defense readiness. The report indicated all networked weapons platforms remained functional, but pattern recognition software had started behaving erratically. Tactical AI began mislabeling friendly assets. Targeting logs refused to lock coordinates near Terran-flagged zones. Even drone simulations triggered failsafes when presented with Earth's iconography. Thrall summoned his signal corps captain. I want every training node scrubbed, start over, wipe the Terran response profiles. The captain didn't move. Thrall narrowed his eyes. Did you not understand the order? The captain responded without blinking. Sir, the nodes have already removed those profiles. We didn't delete them. The systems did. Thrall dismissed him and called Central Security. His call didn't connect. Elsewhere, on board the orbital platform Nar Shunra, a science team detected deep-wave tremors near the galactic core relay. No station should have been operating in that region. It was a dead sector, once considered a possible expansion zone, before Earth warned all systems to avoid it during a prior ceasefire. The signal was short, a pulse, sharp and coded. One word. Routed through secure military bandwidth. Fino. The head technician, a civilian contractor who had seen the Kasari Prime footage early in her tenure, shut down the array without waiting for a recall code. When asked for an explanation, she only said, Ellie warned us once. They don't warn twice. On Revon's northern continent, in a restricted communication black site, a council-aligned intelligence node flagged a discrepancy in public morale indicators. Dravari recruitment centers hadn't been bombed. They hadn't been targeted, but no one showed up. Billions of credits spent on holograms, incentives, propaganda. Yet seats remained empty. New applications zeroed out. When surveyed, the responses repeated a pattern. You cannot enlist against an enemy that doesn't fight. You vanish. From the desk of the last remaining governor of Outpost Jarnath, a handwritten notice was submitted with no departmental routing. The message read, We are not overrun. We are not threatened. We are bypassed. And it's worse. Before the note could be digitized, the entire administrative grid of the outpost turned to grayscale. All records folded into archival folders labeled Legacy Only. Inside a council archive hall, a Valtari delegate demanded an official response from Earth. He stood beneath the display wall, now updated. Dozens of formerly disputed territories now displayed static where labels once existed. He gestured toward the projection and shouted, You see what this is? It's not war, it's deletion. Another delegate stood and replied with unease. Deletion of what? The first hesitated. His voice faltered. I'm not sure anymore. Message received. That phrase appeared across 81 separate Council Grey relay stations at the exact same moment, regardless of location, time lag, or shielding. It did not arrive on any scheduled comms band. It bypassed security encryption, dodged trace software, and didn't require translation. It wasn't a broadcast. It was a statement. From Earth. Years had passed since the last direct confrontation, if one could call it that. Since the Terran probe dissolved in the council chamber, no further encounters, threats, or warnings had followed. The memory of Earth's retribution lingered like a wound. Everyone had stopped bandaging. Now the scar reopened. The transmission came embedded in what should have been a routine navigational software update issued to deep-range merchant beacons. No source was listed, no file size. The message unfolded itself when accessed, playing as audio across all systems simultaneously. A single human voice, steady and unshaken, said, Do not fear us, do not engage us, let peace remain. Nothing else. The message was followed by a complete system purge that erased the file as soon as it ended. But it had already been heard. Inside the Council Strategic Records Annex, a room once filled with debates over territorial equity and political doctrine now held only observers. They didn't speak. They logged reactions. Delegate Rur of the Lithari stood in front of the central projection tier. The screen had switched to display Earth's planetary code in block text. Nothing about it blinked. It sat there, unembellished, as if it had always belonged. They didn't threaten us. Rur muttered. They didn't request terms. That wasn't diplomacy. Councillor Yesek, oldest of the Mondrethi Alliance, replied without looking away. That was a verdict. Across multiple systems, governments initiated data audits. New documents were discovered embedded in unrelated architecture. Files titled Human Parameters. They were never claimed, but everyone knew who authored them. The file was 1 page long. It contained 3 statements. Provoked. Response. Response. Closure. Closure. Disengaged. It was not a policy. It was a law, and it had already been enforced. The council reconvened in limited quorum, with only 17 of the original 82 species attending. Many were no longer recognized as governments. Some hadn't been heard from in multiple cycles. The speaker of the assembly began reading the Terran message aloud, but stopped midway. "I can't add to this," he said. The file was placed into Galactic Core memory by unanimous decision. The last entry in the conflict ledger. No edits allowed, no counter notes appended. On the Dravari homeworld, underground vaults once used to house colonial war trophies were sealed. The public didn't need reminding. Their capital buildings had replaced the council flag with nothing. Not even their own. Their war records were now classified under historical exception. Young Dravari were taught that Earth was not a species, it was a protocol. No one argued. The one surviving officer from the Dreadnought fleet who had never spoken since returning stood in front of a military tribunal. They didn't accuse him. They wanted to understand. He finally answered one question. "What did you see?" He replied, "A future without us in it," then sat down and never spoke again. In academic halls across non-human civilizations, lectures once focused on human psychology now centered on Terran methodology. Not warfare, not conquest. Something else. One scholar described it best during a recorded panel. Earth doesn't win, it ends interactions. That's what frightens us. Most civilizations threaten, negotiate, adjust. Earth evaluates, executes, and exits. He closed his statement with a bitter laugh. And we mistook that for passivity? 3 Earth years later, the Council attempted to renew first contact protocols with emerging species in outer bands. A new clause was added, non-intrusion mandate, Terran clause, to ensure none of them approached sectors flagged in gray. The clause was not up for vote. It was enforced by relay layer system architecture tied to navigation software. No ship could even chart a route through those regions. Not because Earth said so. Because no one dared question the code again. Inside a private collection held by an anonymous trade archivist, a strange item surfaced. An original paper transcript of the Terran closure message. It had been printed against protocol. It shouldn't have existed. When scanned, the paper's ink signature read, "Let peace remain." No one claimed authorship. The archivist stored it behind layered shielding and never looked at it again. On the mining world of Ferrex 3, a worker discovered an old human cargo beacon half buried beneath the glacier ridge. It blinked once when touched, then powered down. The phrase on its side, "If seen, you've strayed too far." The crew left it where it was. They sealed the ridge and marked it forbidden. In one of the last meetings the council held regarding Earth, a junior delegate asked the room, "What if they come back?" The chairman answered with a question of his own. What if they never left? The transcript of that session was closed under category Philosophical Threat Assessment. Years passed. Trade flourished elsewhere. Civilizations rebuilt. Wars began and ended over minerals, policies, and lines on maps. But across all systems, one law held without enforcement. No one entered Terran-marked territory. No one challenged the gray. Earth had never demanded a treaty. They didn't need one. They had already ended the story and made sure everyone knew how it would end if repeated. Centuries later, on the edge of a new exploratory charter in Sector Vorn 16, a Veltari expedition ship paused at the threshold of an uncharted system. The navigational AI flagged the zone as ancient Terran space. No warning. Just a familiar lockout. One of the officers, born generations after the Terran conflict, stared at the interface. Why does it say restricted, origin forced? His commander didn't answer right away. Instead, He reached into a sealed case and withdrew a fragment of archived protocol. Just a single laminated card. He handed it over. It read, Species provoked. 1 species vanished. Everyone else remembered. No one crossed the line.